Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm. In this video, we are going to create the enemy. Now this enemy is going to be very easy to implement because we're not going to have to worry about the enemy moving. It's just going to be a spike. Now your environmental, sorry, I just hit my mic. Your enemy can just be an environmental hazard like mine, a spike. It could be an enemy that just stands there. And if you want, you can actually animate your enemy too. So he stands there but does some kind of animation. It's completely up to you. But I'm just going to create a spike. So first thing we need to do is we need to create a new object. So we're going to click this plus button to add a new scene. And instead of a 2D scene, we're going to use a node called Area 2D. Now an Area 2D is a special kind of node that basically just it's anything that just sits in your game and it waits for something to cross into its area. So we're going to use this to determine if our player has crossed into the enemy. All right, let's rename this to enemy. And let's save this into our objects folder. So we're in objects, enemy. Okay, perfect. So objects, good. So now and I could double check, make sure I have my enemy down here in my objects folder. Beautiful. You can probably tell why I like using folders because I can collapse everything and it looks nice and neat. Anyway, so with our enemy, we're going to grab a sprite node so that we can actually see our enemy. Now, because I'm not animating mine, I'm just using a sprite 2D node. And I'm going to bring in the spike and drop that into its texture slot so we can see the sprite perfectly. Now we need to make a collider. This is going to be the interesting part. It's still going to be a collision shape 2D. But we don't want a square around this because there's a lot of, this is an angled spike. We don't want the player to we want the player to be able to come into this area without getting hit, right? It would seem unfair if the player's here and it gets, and it registers a collision, right? So we don't want a square because it's going to fill in this empty space. What we want is we want something called a new segment shape 2D. This will allow us to kind of draw our boundaries for where our collision is going to be. So I'm just going to put a collider on this angle here. Now notice that I didn't go all the way down. The reason for that is because this spike is going to be sitting on the floor and I don't want the collider to cross into the collider for the floor. Because the way we're going to program this spike is if this collider gets hit by anything, it's going to reset the level. So if we did that and we put a spike into our level, it would just constantly be resetting because this collider would be colliding with the tile underneath. So we're going to make sure there's at least a couple of pixels between that collider and the other, and the one below it. All right, so we have one collision shape. Let's add another one for the other side. And this is going to be a segment shape 2D. Bring that up. Bring this over. And again, I can be a little bit more precise probably with my colliders, just so that the player doesn't feel cheated. So that way, okay, cool. So now if the player hits this spike, either on this side or on that side, then it's going to register a collision. Beautiful. Alrighty. So now we're actually almost done with this. We just need to create a script that handles what happens here. And I'm going to use this, this enemy to explain a concept called signals. Signals can be a bit difficult to understand, so I'm going to go through it pretty slowly. So first we need to create a script. Let's select our enemy here. Click the plus script button. Let's make sure that it's being saved into the scripts folder. And we don't have a template that we're going to use. We're just going to, actually, we can just go ahead and select empty if we want. Nope, you know what? Yeah, empty is fine. So we're going to create a blank script that only has the extends keyword in it. Now, with this script, we can actually start adding signals. Signals are going to be things that are triggered whenever a specific action happens in the game. Specifically for this enemy, we want something to be triggered whenever that collider has been breached by another collider, right? So the way we would set this up is we go over here and click on the Node tab. Now, sometimes whenever you select Node, you don't see anything in there. You just have to reselect your object, and then your nodes should populate. So we have a bunch of nodes here. Area 2D, collision object. It's basically trying to draw any of the signals that might actually be applicable to this object. What we're looking for is we're looking for body entered. Body entered. That's the signal that we want. Whenever anything enters this physics body. So we're going to double click on body entered, and it's going to bring up this menu. What enemy or what thing do you want to specifically attach this to? We're going to attach it to enemy and click connect. It's going to automatically add some code into our script so that we can start adding some content. All right. So whenever this function now is going to trigger whenever something enters this body. All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually reset the level that we're playing. So this is pretty easy to do, but the line of code seems to be a bit long. So let me just explain it as I write it. So we're going to write it on line 4 where this pass is. This is where we're going to write the next line of code. What we're going to do is we want to get underscore tree. What that means is basically the scene that we're in is a tree. Trees are a concept in computer programming where objects can be organized. This is organized as a tree. The root node is like the trunk of the tree, and then the branches come off of it. We're going to get this tree, okay? And we need open and close parentheses after that because that is a function. We're going to get tree, and we're going to change underscore, and we're looking for change scene to file. So we can just hit tab and it will finish that. Change scene to file. And we want to change our scene to a specific scene in our game. Okay? And what we're looking for is res, because it's inside of our res folder, colon, // And then we're going to look for our scenes folder. So scenes / level 1. I believe that's exactly how it's spelled. Level 1. So level underscore 1.tscn. Okay. So basically what that's going to do is it's going to get from this tree, it's going to access this tree, and it's going to say change the scene that we're currently in to a specific file. This is the file path to that file specifically, level1.tscn. So all this is saying is basically whenever anything hits a spike, we're going to reset the level. Okay. So let me go ahead and save my scenes. Let's make sure we have level 1 selected, and let's play. Oh, you know what? I need to add a spike into my level. So let's do that first. So I'm going to instantiate an enemy into my project, and let's just put it right here for testing purposes. Okay, and let's get it to line up so it looks nice. All right, so I have my spike in there. Now let's play. So everything looks good. When I hit that spike, it should reset the level. And it did. And it's instantaneous too, by the way. It resets the level almost immediately. Not even almost. It resets the level immediately. Okay. And the other side of the collider works just as well. Okay, perfect. So my spike works the way it's supposed to. Now, in a regular video game, you're probably going to want to like freeze everything for a moment, add some kind of a visual cue or an auditory cue showing that, you know, your player actually hit the spike and took damage or whatever. But for this game, this seems to be sufficient, I think. Okay, So now what we're going to do is we want to add a bunch of spikes to this game to make the game more interesting and tough, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to start adding a bunch of enemies to this. So I want to be able to organize my enemies. I'm going to create a new node 2D just as a parent that will hold all of our enemies. So I'll call it enemies. And then I will drag this enemy as a child of the enemies, right? And now I can duplicate this spike. Control D. Now I have enemy 2, and it's just sitting on top of enemy 1. I can just drag it out to wherever I want it to be. And again, I want to make sure that my my pixels line up perfectly. So it looks like my spike is sitting on the ground. Another thing you can do is, let me duplicate and create another spike. You can actually rotate this around. If we go to our inspector and we go to transform, you can rotate it around 180 degrees. And you can have like ceiling spikes. Right? So, I'm zooming in and zooming out way too fast. Sorry about that. So you can do spikes on the wall. You can do all kinds of different spikes, right? And all you have to do is just keep duplicating. And the keyboard shortcut for duplicate is Control D. And then we can, let's rotate this back to 0, put a spike here. Now notice that I have like one pixel gap between these. I'm going to just snug it right in there. Okay. Let's Control D, put another one down here. All right. And we can just keep adding. And the beautiful thing about, and you're probably going to want to move these around and play around with the placement as you play the level. But the beautiful thing about duplicating them like this, notice that they all have their signals, they all have their scripts, they all work exactly the way we expect, and they're inside of a parent that we can just hide. So we can hide all of these. We can add as many enemies as we want, and it's not going to clutter our scene view because we can just hide the children, right? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and play my level. Let's save all scenes. Let's play this level and see if all of my spikes work as intended. All right. That one works. That one works. Now you're probably thinking, of course they're going to work. You just programmed it to do that. Well, a big part of game development is play testing. You've got to test to make sure everything works exactly the way you expect. Because sometimes you'll just get a bug. Sometimes you'll have an error. Something won't work the way you think it should, right? But I've just tested all of my spikes work perfectly. And I'll probably add more spikes as I go. And again, I can play test and figure out where are the natural places a player will want to jump to. Let's put a spike there to make it a little bit more difficult, give them obstacles to avoid, and whatnot. But that is how you create an enemy in your game. Let me see. Is there anything else that I want to... Nope. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So adding enemies is really easy. It's definitely easier every time. Anyway, adding enemies is easy. It's definitely easier than adding a new a player character. So go crazy. Add spikes all over, add hazards, add a different kind of enemy if you want. You can even, create a new scene, add a new piece of artwork, create some variation to your enemy. Let's say you wanted to, I don't know, let's say for this one, you wanted to just change the visibility of it and change the color. Let me zoom in. You can go to visibility, modulate, and you can start changing the color of your artwork so that you have a different color of spike just to add some variations. It's completely up to you, whatever you want to do. Alrighty, and I'm going to reset that because I want all my spikes to look the same. Perfect. Go ahead and add some enemies into your game so that your player actually has obstacles to avoid. All right, I'll see you next time.